I am about to call the finance meeting to order for May 11th. So, roll Corpus Dax.
Present.
Alder Bill Galvin.
Here.
Alder Johnson.
Here.
Okay, and Alder Dorf is also here. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Also, approval of minutes. Entertain a motion.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Is there, moved by Alder somebody Johnson,
Johnson.
second by Alder Corpus Dax. All those in
Alder
favor say aye.
somebody.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right. Regular business. Here's the first one. Discussion and possible action to award the contract for financial advisory services to Ehlers and Associates, the highest scoring proposer to RFP 2021-01. Scoring summary attached. Staff, do you have any comments you'd like to make on this?
No, really. I think the summary sheet's in front of you. There's a summary, there's the scoring recap, and then the summary page is included. So let me know if you have any questions.
It looked like that Ehlers would be able to do the additional services, right, that we needed, whereas the other one that was close couldn't offer the additional services, which was fair. So that made sense to me that we would then have gone with Ehlers. Anyone else have any questions on that?
How long is the agreement?
Calvin, you're muted.
Sorry about that. The way we wrote the RFP, we would have it basically be a year-to-year agreement. We're not locking ourselves in for any long-term, 5-10-year agreements here.
So this would go out to bid again in a year?
No, it would not necessarily have to go out to bid. We would be able to do an extension. I just want to pull up the actual. We'd be able to do an extension without going out to bid each year. But I don't think we have it that we're going to put ourselves into a long-term agreement, but I just want to verify what we put in there real quick.
So basically just has renewable options?
Yeah, so it's a 2-year initial with 3 1-year renewal options.
Okay.
So it could be a potential of 5 years, but the first term is 2 years, and then there's 3 1-year renewals.
Who do we use right now?
Baird.
Baird.
Yeah. We've had Baird for a while. They just can't do the extra things that we would like to have done. I think we talked about this. This seems familiar, like we must have talked about this, but.
Yeah, early into 2020, we had came back to you and asked for some additional money to pay for these additional services through Ehlers.
Yes.
And so we did pay for that in 2020, and we've we like the services that they're offering. We'd like to continue those services. So by the time you add those services and the base fee of what we were paying for issuing of bonds, next year looks like it could get in 2020.
Right.
Because they're combining the services that we used in 2020. In 2021, the projection would be about the same or slightly less than what we paid in 20.
I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by
Second.
Alder Corpus Dax, second by Alder Galvin.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 2, discussion and possible action to award the Green Bay Press Gazette the bid to be the official paper for the City of Green Bay for the posting of legal notices. Bid summary attached. And part of the issue with the Press Gazette, which was explained, I think it was protection policy, maybe it was explained that there's a littering ordinance that they have to follow, and they're going to be working with their contractors, and that there shouldn't be the littering of those circulars that came along with it. Is that accurate? I bet Alder Stoyer, who was in on that little project, knows the answer.
Actually, I was looking at this agenda item and just trying to figure out, how we're going to move forward with this. I'm looking at the vendor 1 and vendor 2 on it and noticing that the Press Gazette has a wider range of newspapers to be circulated. So I don't know if that's an indicator at all. we did work hard on this ordinance recently for the littering. So we did work on that. And I think the Press Gazette is on notice, if you will, about that. And there was some, I'm trying to think who, one of the city staff, I think Assistant Director Renier Wigg got a hold of one of their folks and talked to them extensively about the issues. So it sounds like we have made our point be known. The citizens some are frustrated with the littering and that, and I think this ordinance will help with that. As far as moving forward, I don't know if that should be enough. I can't commit completely to it, but I have a feeling that, they're on notice. So, I think
We did include in the bid language that they had to comply with the littering ordinance and that their subcontractors had to as well. So and they did say that they checked the box that they will comply. So that was specifically called out in this bid, unlike it had been in previous years.
Alder Gerlach, did you have something?
That's what I was going to say.
That's what
It's
you're
in
gonna say.
their
Okay.
contract now that they must
Okay.
comply with the ordinance. The ordinance isn't new. It's just that it's in their contract now.
Right. So that's good. And certainly the deadline being 10 a.m. Wednesday for Fridays, that would not be helpful to us when we need things posted, because we need those agendas posted in the second column, the Press Times. It doesn't come out as often, right? It's not a daily paper.
It's a once a week
Yeah,
publication.
right. So, and we need to post things a lot more often than that. So anyway, is there any more discussion on this? Yes, Alder Galvin.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point. I mean, I get both papers, but do we really need to post anything more than once a week?
Oh, all the time, especially when you have to amend the agenda. And we amended all the time. And the amended agendas have to be in 24 hours, posted 24 hours before the next meeting. So almost on a weekly basis, we are amending agendas.
Okay. And then go
Our
ahead. I'm
bid
sorry.
notices are posted as they come out. So if we have to wait if we have a bid that's going to come out on a Thursday or a Friday, we have to
Right.
wait for the following week to post that. That's going to delay everything by an entire week.
For
One
bids
thing
and
I-
everything.
One thing I would also add is when we have a public notice that's 5 days or 7 days prior, same thing. In some cases, it comes right down to the wire that we know exactly when we have to try to get it printed to meet our minimum state statutory, days prior to the meeting. And I think that would really potentially we could end up missing some deadlines and have to push some meetings back because of the public hearing notice.
So in a way, though, we really have no choice then, whether they follow the littering ordinance or not. There's really-
Okay, I wouldn't say that. In the end, we could possibly, if this wasn't being followed, choose the Press Times, but then pay every time we needed something posted, pay the Press Gazette to post it, which in the end would probably end up costing us way more. We could still choose to do that, but
I don't know about that. I think
Are you sure?
per the statute, I believe the official paper of the city is what all notices are posted in.
and I thought the school board was doing it
You
that
can
way.
choose, I think you can choose to go to multiple, but the official notice has to be in the official paper.
Okay. Then we don't have much choice, Alder Galvin. You're right.
Okay, and then, so the Press Time, have they offered any possible solutions to their weekly, publication that they could do a workaround, like notify subscribers by email or something like that?
As far as I know, it has to be in print.
Has to be
Yeah.
in print, okay.
Simply
I-
for the fact that not everyone has access to technology or the internet and email.
All right. Very much. I appreciate that information.
Alder Johnson?
I mean, if we're being practical here, I mean, the quickest and most efficient way for us to reach the residents of our community today is really through electronic means. So my understanding is that the newspaper isn't necessarily being used as a method to reach the largest number of people in the quickest means possible. We're really just doing it because it's required by state law, right?
They haven't
it's kind of
caught
an
up yet.
unfunded mandate
Yeah.
that state law says we have to have a newspaper. I mean, so my point with that is, even if it's only weekly, is it really that critical in terms of reaching people, recognizing that the way that we do it right now anyway is just electronic.
Well, Calvin just said it has to be in print. So
Yeah.
Right, but could weekly not still suffice?
not if we amend the agenda or if we need the bids, right?
Yeah, I think you're going to end up pushing things out a lot further than they need to be because the Press Gazette, I believe, is 5 p.m. for the next day. So if I
Right.
were to submit something to them now, it could make it into the paper tomorrow.
So what you're saying, when we have to push it out, meaning that maybe the time when we could meet,
Correct.
because we couldn't meet until after it publishes in the paper.
Correct.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense.
If they were to change the statute though to electronic, because I'll be honest, I don't get a written or a typed, a hard copy of the Press Gazette. I get it all electronic. You know,
And
so I
they
mean,
haven't. I mean, we could, you know, that would be a discussion that we could have maybe with the state legislator because it's a statute.
right.
And
We have
we
to
don't have
follow.
control. But for our purposes, is there a motion on this particular item as we have many items to get through?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Alder Galvin. I'll second it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right. 3, for consideration and possible action on a second amendment to the City of Green Bay, Village of Bellevue contract for services for the provision of water and sewer services between bordering properties. And this I read through. Will it have something to do with the firefighting agreement or has nothing to do with that?
Are there any questions? I actually don't see, Joanne is the one who worked on this with us. I'm not seeing her on the line. I can try calling her if we
I
need to.
can try to explain. What it is overall is they've got another property that is within the city of Green Bay that is being billed through water through Bellevue. And they just want the ability to be able to, if they don't pay that bill, to be able to put it on a tax roll like we currently do for our properties.
Okay,
So City of Green Bay the water utility handles Bellevue as well, but it's
Okay.
a Bellevue property that typically they would bill Bellevue for that. So if there's anything delinquent, it just allows them the ability to put it on our tax roll to try to collect it. That's the
Okay.
largest change in this agreement.
okay. It's not very big.
No.
All right. Any questions on that?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Alder Johnson, second by Alder Corpus Dax. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now we are on to the capital improvement plan.
So, for the discussion of the 2021-2025 capital improvement plan, I was hoping we would be able to pick up right where we left off. We've already tackled and looked at the information requested by fire and police. We focused more on 2021 borrowing and 2022 really for the budget. The departments I'd like to tackle today would be economic development and the TIDS. I would like to do IT. I would do like parks and city hall, and then I also like to do transit. Again, the reason why is, and then in this case, we would save DPW, infrastructure, sanitary storm, and parking all until next meeting when the Director of Public Works can attend. So we kind of left everything for Director Grenier for the next meeting. At this point, I see Mike is on the call or on the meeting, so I think we could jump in right into IT.
Okay.
When Pam is going, what Pam is going to show you, this is page 49 of the electronic document, but if you're looking at the hard copy paged book, Pam, if you scroll down just a little bit, if you're on the paper copy.
Which is really not in paper, right? Which is really on the computer.
Correct. It's, if
Okay.
you're looking at just the electronic document book that I sent you, it would be page 9 of the, what we call the CIP book. Otherwise, this is the electronic version, page 49. This is just a summary saying the departments, again, that we were going to tackle. As we took care of police and fire, we'll do DPW later. So at this point, we're looking at IT. Mike has equipment requests for about $213,000 in 2021 and about $300,000 in 2022. Even though many of these items are in this document, we have other funding sources for many of the items that he's requested. In many cases, he has budgeted dollars for this, or he has some remaining fund balance. But Pam, if you would want to jump down to his equipment page. Thank you, Pam. So I will pretty much let Mike take over. These are items, again, we're not talking funding sources as much today. These are all the needs that Mike is trying to, has needs really over the first 2 years. And of course, we can talk about the 3 years after. But these are some of the needs that he has put into our capital improvement plan. Mike, did you want to talk to just kind of some of your annual information and what's really in your first 2 columns?
Maybe he's muted.
He is muted.
Mike.
Excuse me, sorry. Good evening. Basically, every year I've just refunded annual laptop rotations and PCE and monitor rotations. So that you're going to see that in the budget every year. That's 2021. And Diana, we had a discussion after the book was printed about the switching routers for the police department. We were going to not bond for that this year and use different funding.
Yep.
So that would be taken out this year.
And in some cases, we leave it in here because it is a capital need. We just don't bond for it. We just say it's a need, but we have other funding source, correct?
Okay. And then, thank you. And then we've been slowly remodeling or going through City Hall and replacing some of the data cabling because it's 20 years old, and we have newer infrastructure in place that can have more throughput, but the cable is limiting us from doing that. So we did first floor this year, and these numbers are a little high because we were able to use the electricians during the winter. They came in and recabled it for us, and the majority of the cost in these projects is all labor. Occasionally, they're removing the ceiling and putting it back up. So I think for next year, I think these numbers will come down because I'll have a better number using our own city electricians. And then this is the following 2 lines are 4 lines are the annual rotation of equipment.
Mike, can I just jump there kind of on the cabling? I just wanted to, thank Mike, but we really noticed they saw the clerk's office saw a huge improvement when he was able to work on and get the first floor recabled. And mostly it was the clerk's office because between needing access for the voter registration, for the voter system, and then the municipal collections for tax collections, and adding a handful more of computers in that office, we saw a huge increase in speed once he recabled. So I just want to kind of say, I just wanted to add that point that, that's the value of recabling a whole floor.
Okay, thank you. And then as we move further down the line, there's a DR site. We have a disaster recovery site at Fire Station 4, and the UPS there is 10 years old. So that's due for replacement. And basically that's just a battery in case if you lose electricity at the DR site. That's a battery that takes over instantaneously, so nothing powers down. And then 2 minutes later, a generator will power up and power for as long as needed. So it's kind of like a battery backup system. And then PD, MDT rotation, just rotation of more equipment in and out. Scanning documents, we were going to put that in the budget. That is like 50 cabinets of building permit information from the inspection department or planning department. I've seen them move 50 cabinets like 4 different times up and down stairs, and it's just it's a maintenance nightmare. It's using up a lot of space that could be rented out possibly in the future, and we'd have to find something to do with those documents. What we'll do is we'll scan these documents and we're going to rename them by the parcel number. And what we're going to do is immediately put them into our open data portal on the city's website. Everybody will have access to all the building information. People come in from the outside to go find that information. They were unable to during the pandemic. So I think putting a lot of that information out there is a very good idea. And we just spent a lot of labor moving those cabinets around. And then got to replace some UPS batteries in City Hall that are aged. And then the county and we have to make a decision. The information, the equipment in the council chamber rooms is probably 10 years old. And we got to make a decision. And it seems to not be failing. The biggest part that is really failing is the touch screen. But the original equipment purchase was $100,000 10 years ago. And we got to come to some kind of agreement of how to replace our equipment in the future. Is there any questions?
I think it makes so much sense about scanning in those documents. I remember Green Bay Public Schools did that at least 8 or 9 years ago and just got rid of cabinets and paper and, it just and it's so much easier to find when you can put in a keyword or a key number and you can get to the parcel. So that is money well spent. I actually don't have a question for you, but I do for Director Ellenbecker. Did we find out the guidance yet? It's after May 10th by a day. So did the government give us guidance yet on how we can use the funds?
Yes, guidance came out last night.
Oh, so we'll get to hear about that in a little while, you think?
I can try to recap some of what we've learned. We're still collecting the information, reading through. There's a lot of information. Some of these items may be allowed, but again, we really need more.
Okay, you don't have to do it. It's too soon.
I'm not,
next time.
Not really prepared, correct?
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
And Alderdorf, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we should taken up at the last meeting, I think when the guidance came out, it was supposed to come back to finance. Is that right?
I think so. And so probably we'll at our meeting on the 25th, I bet.
Yeah. So I'm saying that there will probably be an opportunity for us to have that talk.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone else have questions or comments for Director Hronik?
Just one quick one. Whoever can answer it. Obviously a lot of this stuff is, short-term lifespan. Are we bonding for any of this, or is this all through the levy?
May 21, there would be no bonding for the IT department. In this case, the 6 items is $163,000. That was all included in the 2021 budget. And the $50,000, the expectation was, and it was budgeted for, that they would, the IT department would use money sitting in the 421 fund. So 2021 is not, would not expect to, the 2021 borrowing would not include anything for IT. Reason why they're on here is there really are IT needs, capital improvement needs, capital needs. And so we put it on the list, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to borrow for them. So it's really a recap of things that IT needs, but we won't borrow for in 21.
Yeah, and I appreciate that explanation. I hope that's the way we're able to maintain that. And I look at PC replacement as an example. That's an easy rotational item. It just makes me cringe to think of a scenario where we might, take out a 5-year note on something that has a 3-year lifespan, which I know has unfortunately happened with other things like vehicles. So I hope we can maintain that trajectory.
2, if not 3 years. There were a couple years in the recent past, in the last 5 years, that those items were in our annual budget. So we have worked with the director, and we have now put them back into the annual budget. So we are starting to see some of these smaller, overall smaller items that have been put back into the annual budget. There were a few years this was in our capital request, and we have borrowed for these.
Well, good job, team.
Thank you.
Okay, I won't have dogs once we're back in person to deal with, so that'll be a good thing. Any other questions? No? All right, should we move on to the next section?
At this point, I think we'll jump to transit.
Okay.
I see Ms. Kiwez is on the line. How the way it works is the city of Green Bay at times will help cover, we don't help pay for facility and usage, which really kind of is depreciation for transit. So when they are have a need, when they need money, capital to cover their match for their buses, sometimes in the past, we have used general levy to cover the match for their capital. And so that is why you're seeing it on here. This 4 is actually the 20% match for buses, and 80% is paid by federal government or state, depends upon the grant. And Patty, I should let her speak to this. But changed with some additional funds that Transit has received in 2020. We will not need to be looking at borrowing money in 2022. So at this point, we really don't have a need for the transit in 21 or 22, but I'll let Patty talk to that if she wants to do any more explanation. So 404 that's in here for potentially for 2022, we will be removing that. And that was really just a very recent decision as we are closing out 2020 year end, that the decision was made to use some of the money that they got in 20 to set aside for this match. Patty, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think you really might react. So just as, Diana had mentioned, or Director Ellenbecker had mentioned that, typically transit does seek for that 20% local match for bus purchases only. All of our other capital needs within the facility are done through other funding sources that we receive from either federal or state. So just this is kind of our anticipation going forward. Things do change frequently with us just because we are constantly looking at other funding opportunities, and we do take advantage of as many of those as we definitely can. The city of Green Bay was awarded 4 buses through the VW settlement. We received some of those. We received 4 of those last year. We'll receive 4 next year. And so those dollars have kind of been spread out. So depending how things go going forward, that dollar amount has been spread out over a period of 10 years for us to try to cover. These numbers, even going forward, may potentially change. And they do change pretty frequent with transit just because of some other funding options. But as Director Ellenbecker said, there's no request for the 21 or 22 from Metro.
That's great.
But going forward, just with the unknown, I guess is why I always do request that it stay in there, just because it's difficult for me to, that far in advance. So.
Alders, any questions? No, see no hands, although I can't see everybody. Okay, thank you, Patty, and thank you, Director Ellenbecker, and we can go on to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. At this point, I think we will jump into, I see Director Detroit is on the phone or on the line, and we'll probably jump into Parks and then go into City Hall. I'll let Pam try to get to the, interesting, that box. Do you see a box over your?
Yes,
I do.
I do. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and see if I can get rid of that. There we go.
Good.
Great. So I will actually probably let Director Ditchite go right into his items. Again, we'll mostly discuss 21, 22, and if he wants to talk about anything in the future for his parks, we can, and then we can jump to City Hall. Yep, I'm sorry. On this screen, Director Manley is just showing that he has some major items of $1 million and 1.6 million in 21 and about 2.2 in 22. He has some equipment and then some fleet requests. So a little over 2 million this year and about 2.8 million for next year. So now, Dan, I will stop talking.
That's okay. Can you go to the page where we have the summary of the park projects? We'll start with the projects first. Okay, so here you see the list here of our 5-year plan. What you'll see as I describe this to you is most of the projects that we're asking for funding for in 2021 are projects that we already received funding for in the past. And when we asked for the funding previously, the estimates were based on very rough engineering estimates. Most of the engineering on a lot of these projects has been completed or is nearly completed. And with the cost of things now, the price has either gone up, or when the preliminary estimate was brought forward, some items might not have been taken into consideration. So in most of these projects, we just need a little bit of additional funding in order to proceed with them. So I'll kind of go one by one with you for 2021, and then we'll talk about the 2022 projects after that. So the first one is the Arnie Wolf parking lot addition. So in 2017, actually, we bonded $310,000 for that project. Since then, we did hire a stormwater management engineer, and what we found out is originally when we put our estimate together, we didn't think we had to do stormwater management because it's a landfill site, but we were informed by Public Works that we do have to do stormwater management. So over the past year, we hired a consultant. They did a stormwater plan for us. So in order to finish the parking lot expansion project, we would need an additional $150,000. So right now we have 281 stalls. What we're looking at doing is adding 104 parking stalls along with the stormwater accommodate the stalls. So that's what the money would be used for. The next project is the Baird Creek Greenway pedestrian bridge. So this started out as a donation from the Baird Creek Preservation Foundation, where they donated $30,000 towards a bridge. And this bridge would be installed near the parking lot entrance on Baird Creek Road. So this is the farthest east location trail. And the reason for the bridge was kind of twofold. One is it connected the trails on the north side of the creek to the south side of the creek, but really it provided an exit point for somebody who was on the north trails to cross over the creek without having to cross over an active rail line, because we don't have a crossing at that rail line. So for years, people have just been crossing across this railroad, and Canadian National would like us to put an end to that if at all possible. So the bridge does multi-functions and various reasons for doing it. After we looked into it, the $30,000 was really just a starting point. So in 2020, we asked for another $95,000 based on a rough engineer consultant that we hired. And now all of the engineering is complete. We had to actually move the bridge to a different location in the proposal due to wetlands and floodway issues. And that made access to the site much more difficult to place the bridge, because they will need to bring a crane in to place the bridge. And so we're asking for another $75,000. So it'd be a $200,000 project with a $30,000 donation from the Baird Creek Preservation Foundation. This is still just a light bridge. So this is not a vehicle bridge. It's large enough to get like a UTV over it, but that's it. It can't get a vehicle over it. When you go down to the next one, Colburn Ball Field Renovations Phase 1. So we actually bonded quite a bit of money last year for this project, or in 2019. We bonded $730,000. Again, that was based on a preliminary engineer's estimate before the engineering was completed and before the stormwater management was designed. Now all of that is done, and it's actually ready to go out to bid. In fact, I think it's already out to bid starting this past week. But we do need another $5 in order to complete that project based on the engineer's estimate. And what we're doing in that project is converting one baseball field into 2 Little League fields, and then we're adding parking stalls. So currently there's 78 parking stalls, and we'll be bumping it up to 128 parking stalls. So this will be a really nice Little League complex with 4 fields, a concession stand with restrooms and additional parking, along with stormwater management when it's all said and done. So it'll really be a nice facility. The next project is Finger Road Ball Field Complex Utilities. So there's an Optimist group, and the softball Little League group would like to install a concession stand with restrooms in the middle of the complex. Right now, there is no restrooms on there. We have porta potties out there. They're really not able to sell concessions. They have a little shed out there, but it's not really conducive to what they want to do for tournaments. And so they have agreed to build the building for us if we run the utilities to it. It's a pretty far run to get the water and sewer and electric out there because, you know, it's not close to the road because they want this complex in the middle of the ball fields. And this ask is consistent with what we've done with all of our other concession stands with restrooms, where the city has funded utilities to the building, but the user group pays for the buildings. So last year, we bonded $150,000. Engineering was done. We needed actually more money. And originally, we were only going to put the concession stand to the road to save money. But the Optimist group really felt strongly to put it in the middle of the complex, which of course added a great deal of expense to the project. So we're requesting an additional $50,000, but that's not even going to be enough to run the utility. So the Optimist group has committed another $127,000 just to help run the utility. So there's a substantial investment and a donation for this one, but we'd really like an additional $50,000 so that we can fulfill our commitments if at all possible. Next project is Triangle Hill Conveyor Belt. And I don't know if you can scroll down to the next screen. There it is, for $175,000. So right now, what we have out there for the tow or for the tubing hill is there's a rope or a chain that goes up the hill, and you can clip the tubes to it. So you don't have to hold on to the rope like you used to have to in the past. Now there's a clip that you can clip your tube on so people can ride up the tube. They don't have to hold on. And then what happens is when it gets to the top of the hill, the tubes just automatically disconnect, and then people can go down the hill. We've had marginal success with that tow rope system. We bought it used in 2015, I believe, for $18,000. It really hasn't met our expectations. So it takes a long time to get people up to the hill. There's usually really long lines on nice days. And then really our biggest problem is we don't make snow out there. And the first thing to wear out as far as the snow goes, and the first reason we have to close the hill in the winter is because there's not adequate snow on that tow rope hill. And so with this conveyor belt system, this is set up where somebody actually stands on the conveyor belt with their tube and they ride up all as one. So snow isn't in the equation at all. And you can really fit a lot of people on quickly. And so it not only does it increase your capacities for people getting up the hill much faster, which adds to the user experience, but also we're anticipating we can be open more days because we're not contingent on having snow on that tow rope hill. So that's the reason for it. This would be a new system. It's really hard to find these used because they're still a fairly new system. So there's anybody who's bought one recently is still using them, but it's a really nice amenity to have. When you go down to the Wildlife Sanctuary aviary replacement for $270,000, that's one where we bonded $100,000 in 2019 to begin the process. And so we weren't sure at the time what we envisioned that aviary to be. Right now we have a walkthrough aviary, which houses our injured wetland birds that are permanently on display. So these aren't birds that are getting rehab. These are birds that are permanently injured and can't be released. And that aviary has been closed because the structure is rotting out. And we feel that the structure isn't safe for people to be inside of that building anymore. But at the time when we bonded $100,000, we didn't know what to expect as far as what the design would be, where it would be located, what the size was, what sort of amenities would be in it. So we hired an architect come up with a design for us, and they came up with a really nice design. So there'd be some like a walkthrough pathway through it. There would be some a little waterfall in there with a little creek in there, and it'd just be a nice walk-through aviary versus just a square room that you kind of walk through right now. And so according to the engineer's estimate, we would need an additional $270,000 to install that. And then Wildlife Sanctuary, Nature Center parking lot expansion. Again, this was one where we bonded $400,000 last year as a starting point, not knowing how we were going to engineer it, how much room we were going to need, whether or not we would have to mitigate wetlands, because there's a lot of wetlands around that. And now we've done the majority of the engineering on it, and we found that in order to build it to how large of a facility we think we need to accommodate the new bear, we would need an additional $800,000 above the money we bonded last year. And one thing to note with that is that if you look at kind of the detailed breakdown for that particular project later on in the CIP, you'll see in there that we have an offset account of $750,000 offsetting that $800,000 expense coming from Bay Beach Amusement Park. So if you recall, when we refinanced the beach project, one thing that the city committed to as part of that refinancing is that the city would take on the debt of $750,000 of that bond loan that was taken out for that project. And so what we're doing is we're putting that $750,000 towards this nature center parking lot project. So in reality, we would only have to, add another $50,000 to the bond request, because $750,000, although the city is tackling the additional debt for that, it's money that they've already borrowed. So it's, the debt is there already. We don't have to go further into debt to complete this project. It's just the city would have to take on the annual payments of that $750,000. So I don't know if you have questions on that. And then the Woods Golf Course property acquisition for $100,000. That's something that we're working with a developer on right now. We're hopeful that we can get a grant for that project so that we wouldn't need any bond funding at all for that project. And we're kind of still working through the negotiate developer on it, and we're still working with the grant to see if it'll get funded. So I guess I don't know if you want to start with the 2021 projects before I talk about the 2022 projects.
Yeah, Dan, one question.
Yeah.
On that question, maybe just to reiterate something that I previously mentioned. I think it was at our last meeting when we talked about the reallocation of that bond for the parking lot. Just making sure that everyone understands that we're acknowledging and recognizing that when and if, we're kind of making a shift, I guess, in our commitment to that beach project then, right? Because there's no guarantee that a future council will reauthorize that bond investment.
That's correct. And so when we talked about that refinancing, what we decided to do to help with the interest payments and kind of the long-term repayment plan of that loan, what we said is instead of using the money we have on hand, we use money we're going to generate in revenues over the next couple of years to help keep the interest rates down or the interest payments down. And it's a pretty significant dollar amount in interest payments that this refinancing was able to save. But yes, you're correct. Once we make this change, that money is gone from the beach project.
Yeah, and I generally have no objection to that. In fact, I wish we would have never, bonded for a project that wasn't ready to go. But nonetheless, it happened. And so I'd rather see it used in this manner than, paying interest while the money sits in a bank account not doing anything good for the city. So I do support that concept, but I just, and I don't know how that beach project is going to, we think that that's going to fundamentally change in scope, or do you anticipate a future request of city council to reauthorize bonding for that?
I have no desire to take out any additional loans for that beach project. The thing we did recently do per our refinancing had a limit to kind of the pier. So we said, okay, we're going to build the pier for this amount of money. And so we actually re-engineered the pier, and that engineering is 95% complete. And we're hoping to bid out the pier very soon and for fall construction. So yeah, the desire here is we have a budget to work with, and we will re-engineer it if we need to stay within our means for that project. And we've already done that for the pier.
Okay.
Alder, your guys are so tiny. Alder Galvin, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. I've got the water on Bay Beach and the wildlife sanctuary. I guess my question for you with the beach project, I mean, council voted for a specific beach project, and there were some concerns about some of it, so it was revamped. But now it sounds like it's being revamped again based on money. And I mean, is it required that you go to council to say instead of a 400-foot pier, because of the money that we budgeted, it's going to be a 100-foot pier?
We already talked about that at the refinancing discussion, that we are going to redesign the pier to stay within the budget. And really all that we ended up doing was the length, I believe, is the same. We straightened it instead of having a curved pier. So by making those changes, I think we also lightly, but not noticeably to the general public. But we did discuss at the Parks Committee when we talked about the refinancing that we were going to redesign the pier to stay within the allocated budget. Right now, we think we can build the beach and the bathhouse with the plan that we put forward, and we don't feel that we have to re-engineer anything for that.
Okay. And we're redoing the parking lot for a wildlife sanctuary, and obviously I think that's a good idea. But I keep thinking back to the current parking lot in front of the Zip and Pippin. Mm-hmm. And I don't recall, if you could just remind me, what were the plans on covering that with asphalt and getting away from that gravel?
Well, technically that doesn't meet city ordinance. You wouldn't be able to build a gravel parking lot like that anymore. I think when it was built, it was kind of grandfathered in because that parking lot was there for years. And yeah, we did modify it slightly when we built the Zip and Pippin, but that gravel parking lot was there. So you're not allowed to do it anymore. We were grandfathered in. Now, at the gravel parking lot that we installed 2-3 years ago out at by the road by East Shore Drive, mm-hmm. That was permitted because that's a temporary gravel lot that we are committing to pave. And so that is actually in our beach phasing plan as far as what year we're going to pave it. So DPW and planning allowed it knowing that we were going to pave it. Right. And do stormwater management for it.
All right. And I guess with the current gravel parking lot, I mean, environmentally speaking, it's probably better to leave it gravel so there's no runoff. But are there plans at some point in time to cover that or to leave it as is?
At some point, the gravel parking lot in front of the Zip and Pippin will go away, and that will turn into additional park space. That's what it shows in the master plan. And then we'll have some sort of a transport to get people from the far west end where that parking lot is and connect that parking lot to kind of the middle area.
Okay. The aviary, we bonded for $100,000 and now the developers think we need $270,000. And if I remember correctly, the current aviary is just something that you walk up in front of. It's not something, is that correct?
No, you currently are supposed to walk through it. It's basically a rectangular box you walk through. Okay. And it's not a very interesting experience to go through that space. You go in, you can see the injured ducks, and then you walk out, and there's not an experience associated with it.
Sure.
So, if we wanted to build something similar to that, just to replace what we have, I'm sure we could do it cheaper than what we're asking for here. But what we're proposing is more of it's more comparable to a nicer zoo exhibit, let's say.
Sure.
So, like, for example, there's a walkthrough aviary that you're probably familiar with at the Brown County New Zoo, where it's just a bigger facility. They have a nice creek running through it. It's more in the lines of what you see there.
Okay. And is it going to be constructed in a way, I'm not sure how old the current one is, but I mean, you're saying it's basically falling apart because the wood is rotted out. Are we going to be constructing this new one so it has a longer shelf life for us? Or, are we going with wood? And if we're going with wood, is there a plan to maintain it so it doesn't have to be replaced?
Yeah, we are going with wood to keep with the look out there, but it'll last years. It's treated well. The structures that were out there now were, I think, built by volunteers. I don't know what sort of quality the wood was when they bought it. They lasted a long time. They lasted 30 years probably, which is a decent amount of time for that facility. But I think this one will last longer because there's going to be more control over the products and what we're specifying. Okay.
And then Triangle Hill, which is, I always loved going out there, but $175,000 for a tow rope. How many times was the hill open this past season or the season before?
I can look into that. I mean, it wasn't open a great deal. The last year or two, we haven't had a lot of snow.
Right. And something I brought up years ago, and it got received and placed on file, was a snow machine. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of a snow machine it would take. I mean, obviously ski hills and that use tons of them and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, would it make it more profitable and more usable if we had a snow machine so we could have it open much more often? I mean, I know the city gets a few bucks when people rent tubes, and I don't remember anymore. Can you bring your own tube there even anymore? Or do you have to use a
Not
city?
anymore.
So you have to use the city storage. Right. So, if, and again, I love it when it's open, but like I said, the last few years, it hasn't been open very much at all, which is unfortunate and out of our control. Comments on that. Thank you very much. Oh, dog parks. And I know you've got a committee looking into it, but you did for 2 parks on the planning stage. Are they at all in the document that we have here?
Well, the one at Dan's Park, and I guess we could have a discussions on that, but it's on the master plan. But I know he made a request to maybe take it off of the master plan or to not implement it because there was concerns by neighbors after the master plan was completed. And so I think that one's temporarily on hold until we kind of get some support from the neighborhood on do they want one or not want one. So that one is not on our 5-year CIP because we don't know where that's going to end up. The one at the shipyard, I think Director Ellenbecker can probably answer that more than I, because that would be part of a phase 2 construction of the shipyard. And I don't really know the status of that, but that would be more through the finance department would look at the funding for that and the timeline.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Alder.
Thank you, Chair. This for Director Ditscheider and maybe even Director Ellenbecker. I'm looking at this plan here. There's a lot of information, a lot of good things, a lot of projects coming up, and I think we're all very happy to see this coming to fruition. But I'm just wondering, like anything else, it is a plan, and I'm just wondering if there may be projects that we might be able to bring forward that aren't on the plan, not necessarily for parks, but for anything. It's more of a general question, as far as the validity of these programs. It is a plan, but I'd like to know if there may be some needs that come up in a year or two that we might want to look at as well. that make sense?
I can jump in. Yeah, again, this is an evolving plan every year. I mean, the minute we print this or the minute we call it done, there's changes. Some things are increased or something needs to be removed. So it absolutely is an evolving plan. And so again, that's why we're looking at what we want to do yet this year, the 2021. It'll help us step into 2022 budget. Again, we'll relook at this for the 2022 budget probably in about 3 months, but hopefully it's a quicker, faster discussion because we've kind of gone through line by line now. We'll tell you about any changes. Here it is. Do you think? And then at that point, we'll decide items we can put in to our annual budget. If it doesn't fit, then we'll have to consider that as part of our 2022 borrowing. But again, this is an evolving document. If something new comes up and it is considered that it's either more critical than something else, maybe something else needs to be pushed back or it gets added or something else needs to be removed. But this is certainly a working document.
And then wouldn't it usually go through the Parks Committee, Alder Steuer or Director Ditchite, something like that? Go through the committee?
So. For me, it was just a general question, just looking at the entire document. And granted, things do change and plans do change, but, I'm glad we have this in place. It's just that, some things might come up in a year or two that might change a little bit, but we'll look at it on a year by year basis.
We will. Good question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's all.
I can't see everybody out there. Is there anyone else that has any questions you could just call out? Oh, yes. Alder Johnson, I see you.
Thank you. Just two things came to mind, Dan, as we were looking at this. The first was recognizing that Light Park should be receiving and accommodating cruise ships starting this year. I know when we met, gosh, it had to be almost 2 years ago, it feels like, at least, over at the CVB office. We were talking about some capital improvements that needed to be made to Light Park to accommodate that additional traffic. Where's that coming from?
Yeah, I could speak to that. So Director Ellen Becker and Director Grenier and I all met and we discussed where the funding would come from. So to accommodate the cruise ships, we do have to do some significant repairs to the docking wall at Light Park along that entire stretch. Director Grenier indicated that his preliminary estimate was, I believe, $1.2 million to make those repairs. And there is adequate funding in, is it the TID or the TIF in this district?
TID just means a district. The TIF stands for the financing for that district. So this would be TIF 5.
So the intention is to spend money from the TIF 5 fund to pay for those repairs.
Would that include some of the parking lot improvements that we had discussed as well? Because I think we had talked about doing a turnaround to accommodate buses, for example.
It can. That's not included in the 1.2 million. But I know that as a city, all the departments are kind of looking at what other projects are potentially out there using that funding source, because there is an excess of funding in there, and we are actively looking for projects. So that is not included in the 1.2, but it's also not forgotten. I know that you've also had the request for the stage and bathrooms there. Those are all projects that we've already talked about as potential projects, and we really haven't finalized a short list of other projects, but it's on the list.
Yeah, and that was actually my second question was just that, the concept of a band shell down there. And I think that there's, some real merit in a public-private partnership on that front. But the reason I wanted to broach it is because even though I think it's premature to put it in a 5-year plan, that when and if that comes forward, I could see it not being 5 years to implement. So I just kind of wanted it for the committee to be aware.
Anybody else have questions on the 2021 request for projects?
No. Anyone? No. Okay.
I'll give a much briefer description for the 2022 projects, because they're, those projects, these would all, for the most part, be new projects that we haven't requested funding for in the past. So the first one on the list, if you go up a page to the beginning, the first one is right there. So it's Bear Creek Greenway Mountain Bike Trail improvements for $100,000. So we have just a really great potential to improve our mountain bike system in Baird's Creek. Every mountain biker I've talked to says it's a gem out there and people don't know it's there yet. And there's so much potential if we just invested a little bit of time and money into that mountain bike trail system. So this would be seed money to do that. Now, we haven't selected what projects would be involved with that $100,000, but there's any numerous projects that we could accomplish, whether it's erosion control or, building, ramps or parking lots or whatever it is. This is just seed money to get started in that plan. And then if you scroll down, the next one is Joanne's surfacing. So the surfacing that's there is original to the pool. I don't remember what year it was built, sometime in the 90s, I believe, that aquatic center was built. And there's a diamond bright plaster surface on the floor of the pool. Every so often that needs to be replaced. So we go in and we patch it, we'll cut out the parts that have delaminated and are starting to pop out, but it's getting to the point where that entire surfacing needs to be rebuilt. What that entails is grinding out the existing surface and then putting down a new plaster diamond coat surface. The next project is $340 to replace the parking lot at Joanne's East High. This would be a project that both us and the school district would team up on. It would be per our agreement on that parking lot. We split all costs 50-50 with the school district. They actually came to us about a year ago and asked that we include this in our bond request because that parking lot is starting to get old. There's a lot of patching that's been done already, but it really needs to be resurfaced. So the total project would be $680,000 with the school district paying for half. And they have it into their financing for the same funding cycle. So if we approve it, hopefully they'll approve it too. But if either one doesn't, then the other one won't approve it. Joliet parking lot improvements for $75,000. Again, that's a parking lot that was grandfathered in. It's a gravel parking lot that doesn't meet compliance. We are currently working with the DNR, and there is an area of concern group that is selecting projects throughout the region. So it's not just the city of Green Bay, it's Howard, De Pere, Ashwaubenon. It's looking at the entire watershed system for the Lower Bay and the Fox River. And they're selecting habitat projects that would be beneficial to improve nature and habitat, whether it's the fishing industry, whether it's vegetation, or whether it's wildlife. So this group has selected, a list of maybe 20 to 30 projects regionally. This is one where a few years down the road, they'd like to do some habitat improvements at Joliet Park. And so they're going to look at finding either federal or DNR or state grants to pay for all of that habitat improvement. But what they won't pay for is access and parking lots. So we figure that it'd be nice to team up with their grants to do kind of a bigger project. And this parking lot would not only pave the parking, but it would create a more accessible walkway to the waterfront, because right now it's just a dirt trail that's very uneven. So that's what this funding would go for. Maybe we would apply for a stewardship grant to do a match to this, because I don't think the $75,000 would cover the entire. This would be seed money to kind of attach to a bigger project.
Does anybody ever look at this plan and think, man, I need to go visit more parks? I've never been to this park.
It's right across the street from me. I can see it from my window.
If you ice fish at all, there are a lot of shanties there because it's a nice ice fishing.
So making a motion to remove this wouldn't sit well with you, Alderdorf.
Not even remotely. Wait till we get to the Joanne's. Where's Chris?
So, and we've already talked to Parks and INS about a few of the projects that they're proposing already. We haven't discussed all of them yet. We haven't talked about Joliet Park yet, but I would say in the next year, we'll bring that forward to Parks Committee to talk about the project that the DNR is trying to coordinate. So if you scroll down, 100,000 to replace the roof at the old shop. So there was an old shop before we built the new one. That shop is still there, and we house a lot of trucks and equipment in there. That roof needs to be replaced. We talk about it year after year. We've patched it as much as we can, but it's an arch-shaped roof, so it's not a traditional shingle roof. So the cost is a little bit higher. When you go to Perkins, now we have 3 projects there for Perkins. We did a master plan for Perkins years ago. Here we're looking at implementing portions of this. So we have 3 projects. One is construct 2 soccer fields for $250. Those soccer fields would go in the location where the Little League fields are over by Military Avenue right now. Because those 2 Little League fields aren't going to be needed anymore once we build the fields at Colburn, which we're asking for funding for 2021 on. Because they don't want to play here because there's only 2 fields. They'd rather play at the complex with 4 fields. And then the east parking lot replacement for $375. If you've ever been to that parking lot, it's pretty much the asphalt has turned into gravel, really in bad shape. And then the last project is a new baseball field to replace one of the softball fields that's there. So what we're hoping is to get 2 baseball fields right next to each other, more for tournaments, with the concession stand and restrooms right in the middle. So we wouldn't have enough money to light that field. It would just be enough money to grade it and do the fencing and kind of get started on it. When you scroll down the list, we have West High School tennis court coating. Again, that's a project we would split the cost with the school district. They brought that forward as a need. We're in agreement with it. I don't remember when those courts were built, but it's been probably 15 years that they've been in place, maybe 12 years. And it's just time to get a new surface on it just to make it look nice again and more playable for the high school tournaments. And then we have $250,000 in there for West Side Pickleball. We haven't selected a location. We've talked about Murphy and Perkins. We've talked about this quite a bit at the Parks Committee. And I think the actual motion that was made at the Parks Committee is see if we can fit it into our 5-year CIP somewhere. I believe that was a formal motion that was made. And so we do feel that it would fit into this year nice. And especially if we're doing all that other work at Perkins, this would be another one to just finish that project up and move on to the next park. So those are all of the park projects for 2022. Any questions?
Any other questions, Alders?
About Baird's Creek and the work being done there. I think it's a great idea. Definitely see an uptick in the mountain bike usage, trail usage. Baird's Creek Road needs so much work. I mean, you go down there on a busy weekend or even just like a nice day, doesn't matter like what time of day, you'll have that small parking lot down on the bottom filled. So then you have people parking on green space. The road from both sides is just a crumbling mess. I think it's great that we're, putting in money here to improve the mountain bike trail, but at the same time, that's more people, that's more usage of the road. And, at what point is that going to be fixed, redesigned? I know we're dealing with wetlands and we're dealing with the DNR. But I think, we obviously want more people using our parks.
Yeah, and I don't know the timeline for Public Works as far as when they have that scheduled in. I can have a discussion with Director Grenier on that. One thing we'd like to do is when that road does get replaced, we'd actually like to maybe realign it slightly to continue our trail even further east and take it underneath the highway and eventually out to Krista McAuliffe Park. And so we're hopeful that we can just kind of shift the road to the north a little bit and squeak the trail right next to the road. That's something I've already had discussions with Director Grenier on, but I don't know the timeline on the replacement of that road. But on nice days, it's busy down there.
Yeah, it's real busy. You have cars lined up on the side of the road, and it's just the road's so narrow to begin with that it makes passing through there difficult and dangerous if you're a pedestrian or someone on a bike.
Yeah. And what we could look at doing, depending on when they have that scheduled in for replacement, that would also be the ideal time to maybe look at increasing the size of that parking lot at the same time, whether we add that to our 5-year CIP or whether or not Steve adds that to his bond request when it comes time to rebuild that road.
And with the Baird's Creek Trail being a good area for people to walk their dogs, have we looked into trail cams to prevent people from letting their dogs roam unleashed? Because I know that's one of the parks where it's a real big issue.
Yeah, we have not looked at trail cams down along that trail. We can look into that, see what the cost would be. It's hard because a lot of the times those trail cams, you don't get the detail that you need to really be able to identify somebody. And then it really comes down to what the policing is with the trail cam. And it's something we can look at. I've never had that request before along that trail, but we can have some discussions with the police department and see what it would take and whether or not it's a feasible option.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alder Galvin?
Thank you. I get out to Bears Creek quite a bit. I love hiking the mountain bike trail. I've been doing it for years. It's pretty good. And it's been there so long that some of the old signposts that were posted on trees have actually been absorbed by the trees. You almost can't see them, or they're literally 10 to 12 feet up off the ground because the tree has grown. And I've noticed that you've put some new trail markers out there. You've got the brown trail and the purple trail, and I think the orange trail and that. But I still have difficulty, and I don't know if it's my age again, but I get mixed up. You can't find the trail markers. And I don't know if there's people vandalizing the trail markers, because I noticed there's been some fresh graffiti out off of Wilder Park where people are actually painting the trees off the trails and that kind of stuff. But another concern I have is I see a lot of erosion, in part from some individuals that are creating their own trails for dirt bikes. And I've noticed that at one spot, I noticed where it looked like someone took a whole lot of old brush and blocked one of those trails. But as part of our development, are we looking into means of preserving the trails, one, so we don't have an erosion, but also so that they're better marked? And I know you guys haven't replaced the signs at the parking lots yet, but that would be a huge help too, to get some decently marked signage out there at the parking lots. And dovetailing in on Alder Corpus Dack's comments about cameras, and this is, again, goes to dog parks and stuff, because there is nowhere to let your dog run. But if we do have complaints, I don't know why, again, if cost wasn't a problem, why we couldn't install parking lots that would actually be good enough to detail the vehicles, the license plate, and a good detail of the owner and the dog. So if we do have other cameras set up on the trails and we see violations, someone who follows up on this at a later date could easily identify the individuals and send out notices. 10 Years Park is a perfect example. We had some problems out there with unwanted behavior by certain individuals. We put a camera out there. We documented the license plate numbers of everybody that was visiting the park and sent out information letters, which dissuaded some of the people that were conducting illegal behavior, not to go back. And again, if we look at what other cities do in that kind of stuff, sometimes we can find ways of making this happen so we can make our parks more user-friendly and safer for people that do want to use it.
So is this more of an IT department or IT working with parks? Or Dan, do because I also had suggested cameras at the Red Smith shelter when there was some vandalism there. How do you feel about cameras at the parks?
Well, what we usually do when requests come forward is we work with IT and we work with the police. So we'll look at where the ideal locations are. We'll look at what type of cameras to buy, because there's a lot of different types of cameras, and the more you spend, the higher quality and resolution you get. You can also pan certain cameras if you spend a little bit more. So we develop a game plan moving forward. But we usually only install cameras if it's a recurring issue. So if there's a continual problem, that's when we'll install cameras.
And I wonder if that's the right way to be going about it. Or I wonder if we should have a strategic plan for installing cameras as security measures throughout the system, where we spend a bit every year. I think Alder Galvin had a good point about the trails, but if we only are doing this in response to complaints, things have got to get pretty bad first, right? Mm-hmm. Is it just so hugely expensive that we can't really even think about having kind of a 5-year camera plan?
Well, it's something I'd be okay with. It's not in our budget right now. I don't object to putting more cameras in the parks. It comes down to a cost issue is what it comes down to, and an enforcement, because obviously if you have the cameras, then who's monitoring them? Or is it just look at it when there's an issue? And that's really the police end of things, to see what they can handle and what they can't. But it's really just a cost issue. I mean, each camera can run, I think a cheap camera is like something they can run up to about $10,000, depending on how expensive of a camera you want. And that's just to buy the camera. You then have to figure out how do you get power to it and Wi-Fi, and there's other issues with that. So I don't object to, putting a budget item in, whether it's in our bond request or our annual budget, where we look at adding cameras in the parks on a yearly basis. It's just another expense that we'd have to look at.
And as I'm thinking, this isn't the right place to be talking about this. A communication should go into parks. That's where we should be dealing with it, not because we have plenty to do in this meeting without talking about this. But I think maybe Alder Galvin and I should work on a communication and to get the ball rolling. How do you feel about that, Alder Galvin?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on with the real work that we're doing tonight and continue.
So I don't have anything else on the park projects. We can move on to City Hall projects if there's no other questions.
Anybody object to moving on to City Hall? Nope. Okay, move on to City Hall, please.
Are we going to do equipment and fleet later then for parks?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We didn't finish. All right, let's get equipment. Or how do you want to do it, Director DeTite?
I guess I would prefer to just talk about equipment, because we don't have any equipment for City Hall anyway.
Okay, however you want to do it is fine.
All right. What are we on here? Equipment or?
I'm sorry, did you want equipment for parks or did you want City Hall?
We can do equipment for parks. Let's go to that since you have it on the screen. Let's see. So equipment, these are pretty standard items that we usually request here. Just a few things I want to point out here. So some of this equipment is for forestry. So we have the 72-foot spider lift for $168,000, and then we have a trailer for it, which is down below. It's $1,680. Scroll down. So it's those two. So $1,680 and $12,320. So those are all forestry equipment. They were just entered into the system differently. So let's talk about the spider lift first. So what that is it's a giant boom truck is what it is. That'll make it much easier for our forestry crews to get into tight areas. We have a boom truck right now, but it really doesn't meet our needs as much as what this would do. And so we really need another one out here. So this is a new unit. And then what we're proposing in this, I know we're not talking about funding for it necessarily, but how this is broken out is because this is a forestry expense. We're proposing that the stormwater account pay for $88,000 of that, which would be $147,870. And then the bond would be the remaining 12%, because forestry is funded 88% by the stormwater account. So for that one piece of equipment, the bond would be just over $20,000, and then the rest would go to the stormwater account. Now, when you look at the trailer, for some reason that was entered into the system differently, and it's already been split. So you can see for that trailer, it's a $14,000 trailer. The bond would pay $1,680.
Did we lose the speaker for Dan? Can everyone hear?
I cannot hear him.
Okay, good. It's not just me then. Director Ditchite, you are absolutely muted.
He just keeps going though.
Yeah. Director Ditchite, can you hear me? I think he's completely disconnected. Can you hear me, Director Ditchite?
I'm sorry. Every so often, my computer, the volume just shuts off and I have to reset it. So were you able to hear everything I said about the two pieces of equipment for stormwater?
I'm sure it was fine, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I think we got it covered. Yeah, you're pretty, you don't have to be quite so detailed, You're good, though.
Sounds good. The other thing is the Easy Dirt Screen Edition for $35,000. We usually buy a lot of topsoil for forestry to plant the trees. This will save us a considerable amount of money because we can screen topsoil and screen all the debris out of it and place it as clean topsoil. So that actually is going to save us quite a bit each year by buying that piece of it. The rest is just kind of standard equipment between mowers and UTVs, and I believe there's a trailer in there also.
Okay. Uh-oh.
I believe that in next year's equipment, there is some more forestry equipment in there. So again, we could either...
Why are we talking about next year? Or Director Ellenbecker, weren't we really focused on this year, or do we want to talk about next year and then talk about it again next year?
The reason why we were hoping to, as we spent this time to go through this document, this will take care of the 2021 borrowing, which we expect to do in June or July of this year, the next month or two. And within 3 months, we'll be looking at the 2022 budget. And at that point, I don't want to go through every single line again to relook at the capital improvement plan. So this is, if we look at it now, back to you in fall and just say, hey, these are the things that we have tweaked and changed, but however, the directors have just explained to you what their intent was for the 2022 column. That's why we were kind of focusing on 21, 22. The mayor's goal and our goal has been for the last couple of years is to get our capital improvement plan lined up with our operating budget. Now we seem for one reason or another, we can't get them lined up. So we would like to get the 2022 borrowing lined up with the 2022 budget and discuss it this fall. So we're trying to, since they're so close together, we were trying to focus on both the years this year.
I think that's good. And I also think that so much of the stuff are no-brainers. We got to have it. So I know, Director, you've got a lot of justifications. Alders, do you want to ask just questions on things? Or do you want Director Ditchett to go over every single, which I think we're going to say yes to because we obviously need those items. How do you want to handle?
I think he's done, right?
I'm pretty much done.
No, I don't think he's done. Okay, well, we didn't start 22 yet, right?
We didn't start 22. But again, the only thing that I really have to say about 2022 is, there is some stormwater or some forestry equipment in there also. So we would look at splitting that equipment between stormwater and bond or budget.
Thanks. Are there any questions about that?
No.
All right. Now, do you want to go to City Hall or do you want to go to somewhere else?
One more. We should just look at real quick at a high level. We could look at parks, their fleet, their request for their vehicles. Yep.
Yes, that's a good idea. Okay.
So for 2021, we only have one piece of equipment in there for $38,500. It's a pickup truck. A lot of our other fleet, we've kind of gone with the lease option. So much of it, we had more on here, but we took it out because we're leasing it instead. So that's why it's fairly low this year. Next year, it's a little bit higher because, we're not getting as many lease vehicles next year.
I'm glad that lease's working out for you.
Yeah, to get those leases in over the last month or so, and so far it's working out well.
Any questions, Alders?
None.
No?
Nope.
Okay. City Hall?
City Hall. So I'll kind of start out with the broad description first, and then I can, take as many questions as you want on this. So there's a couple of things that we're requesting here, and I just have to find this. Hold on. So each year there's a desire. Well, let me kind of backtrack. There's 4 things that we'd like to get done over the next 5 years if this is funded. So City Hall was built in, I believe, the 50s. You've been in this building quite a bit. You know what it looks like. You know what renovations have been done to the 6th floor. I'm sure you've heard from Steph that it'd be nice to renovate some of the other floors too, to be kind of consistent with what happened to the 6th floor. So some of those expenses are incorporated here in the 5-year plan. But other things that are incorporated in here too, which are really more of those are needs.
You're muted again, Dan.
We lost you, Nan.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Gotcha.
All right.
Got you back.
I don't know. My computer does this sometimes, not always.
That's Mr. Ronick's.
Yeah. Let him handle that.
So anyway, the actual renovations to each floor, I guess you can decide whether or not that's a want or a need, but there is a request by each floor to do a renovation similar to what's been done on the 6th floor. But there are some more pressing needs that we really need to talk about. And the first one is in 2021, which is replace the main electrical service. So this building was built in, I believe, the 50s. The electrical service that's there is still, it's still original to the building. And if you've done any construction lately, you've seen that all major transformers, which is the big utility box that WPS installs as the main power into a building, those on outside of the building, so they have easy access to it. In City Hall, it's in the basement of City Hall, and it's in a room that's under lock and key. Nobody's allowed in there. WPS says that our equipment there is ancient, and we are the only customer that still uses this system. And so they have one piece of equipment in storage just for us if our transformer ever blows, but there's several transformers there. They can't make these anymore. I mean, these are out of date. They have an old one sitting around that, but we really have to look at updating our electric to get that electric service outside where it should be to make it code compliant. And as part of that, we would replace all of the electrical panels at the same time. So we have, talked this through. We hired an electrical engineer. There is a way to do this where you temporary power and keep City Hall running while you're doing it, and do the main transfer over a weekend. So there'd be little disruption to City Hall. All of the IT stuff would be on on a generator, so we wouldn't lose IT anything during this renovation. But it's one of those where there's a concern that if this ever fails and we don't have the money on hand and we don't have the engineering done and it's not bid out, it could be a long repair where City Hall is just not functioning, and it could be down for an extended period of time with no electric. Now, like I said, do we need to fund this year? I can't tell you yes or no to that. I'm just telling you what I do know, which is the equipment we have is original to the building. WPS doesn't build it this way anymore, and you can't find the parts. And how long will our system last? That's your guess is as good as mine. But we really need to start considering replacing the electrical if we're going to stay at City Hall here. And then when you go to the next thing that needs to be done is the roof. So the roof has been leaking for years. We patched it as much as we can. If you've been up to the 6th floor, you'll see that there's still areas where it's still leaking, and you'll see even in their brand new tiles, you'll see if it's leaked. The issue that we found is we also hired the same consultant that did our electrical work to do a mechanical study for us. The mechanicals are the same situation as the electrical, where it's all original to the building. So what we found with the mechanical is a lot of the stuff that we have can't be replaced like for like. If you replace it, you have to make it to code. And a lot of what we have does not meet code because the building was built in the 50s as far as HVAC system and mechanical system. So even our HVAC system, the only rooms that are meeting code as far as how much ventilation they get are the rooms that have a window. So all of the hallways and all of the rooms that don't have a window also don't have air circulation. So then that doesn't meet current code. So there is a kind of a health and well-being aspect to the ventilation. So the ventilation and mechanical repair comes out to about $6 million to do all of that work. It's a hefty price tag, but again, if it breaks and we don't plan ahead, you could be out without heat or air conditioning or ventilation for an extended period of time. But what we are able to do is phase the mechanical replacement over multiple years. So in 2022, we have 1.1 million in there. In 2023, we have 1.3 million. In 2024, we have 756, and then so on. And then the last year would be 1,350,000. I believe that finishes it all up when it's all said and done, or maybe it goes another year beyond that. I'd have to double check. But the big thing with the roof, and here's where we have to decide what we're going to do with the mechanical, is the mechanicals are not set up. Right now, all of our mechanical stuff is in the basement, which is not conducive for replacing it. And so really the cheapest way to replace the mechanical is going to be to put it on the roof and get it out of the basement. And so by doing that, we have to extend our penthouse and make the footprint a little bigger. Right now, there is a little room on top of the roof for some of our mechanicals. We have to make it bigger if we're going to even consider replacing the mechanicals. So what our consultant is telling us is don't spend money on the roof if you're planning on replacing the mechanicals, because that'll be money wasted because you'll just have to rip it up to build the penthouse. So what we're showing here is in 2022, we have 1.1 million to replace the roof to build that penthouse and then do some of the mechanical work. And then along with that, we'll hire a consultant for $500,000 to do all of.
You're muted again.
Yeah, we lost you. Can't hear you.
It's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going.
But those are some good ideas that he's got.
Sorry. If somebody could raise their hand and let me know when you can't hear me, that would be helpful.
Because you can't hear us either then?
No, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
So we'll start going like this.
We're doing this. Can't hear you.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about
we'll
that.
make motions. Okay.
There you go. So I don't know how much of that you caught, but in order to replace the roof, we have.
The penthouse, the mechanicals, you don't want to do that first. Got that.
Okay, so that, in a nutshell, that's what it is.
Well, it all makes sense.
So it's a hefty price tag for City Hall, and I guess I don't know what the stance is of the City Council and the Finance Committee, if there's any desire to put this sort of funding into City Hall or not.
Yeah, so
These are pretty expensive.
I mean, I would make a comment on that because I broached this topic last time where I was concerned about the amount being invested into City Hall without having a long-term discussion, about what the future of this facility is. So just so that everyone else is maybe updated and up to speed, I did submit a communication following that last meeting to Protection and Policy, suggesting the creation of an ad hoc committee to explore the feasibility and necessity of a unified municipal services building. And I guess I'm of the belief that before we stick a dime into major capital improvements like what's outlined here, I think we got to give that committee, assuming its support by City Council. I mean, I think that committee's got to be time to really evaluate again if that's feasible. I mean, you're looking at a 5-year plan here of roughly $10 million. That $10 million applied towards a new building, I feel like would be a much better investment. And then it would provide an opportunity for us to evaluate alternative uses for the current City Hall. But so from that perspective, I would prefer to see us electrical service at least until next year. Let that conversation unfold. I mean, and I appreciate the need for that to be done, but it's existed that way for 70 years. I don't think another year is going to, really harm us. It could potentially save us substantially depending on the outcome of, that committee.
So Alder Johnson, just in the past, when we talked about the new building, it was only going to be for like police and at most
right.
Police and fire. It was never going to be police and fire and City Hall. And I mean, that's huge. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yes. So I mean, the other problem with the past is that you had, a committee that was comprised of police and fire representatives, and that was it. I mean, it's really hard to move a project like that forward when you don't have global representation to figure out how you're going to move a project like that forward. So I think that there are some different perspectives, some different theories that could be brought to the table on what this looks like, but other communities have successfully done projects. I'm not saying it's the right answer, but I'm saying that an ad hoc committee with the right representation should be able to effectively explore that option. And you know what? And if they go through that process and say, it doesn't make sense, or there should be two separate facilities, or whatever that outcome might be. But I think it's a little bit careless for us to commit this level of funding into a building that, quite frankly, is dying.
I don't even know how to react to that. I hear what you're saying. I imagine it's 10 years out in the future. We're going to need the electricity replaced before 10 years is up. We might want to do some of these things. I mean, the roof is leaking. There are some things we maybe have to do as repairs. So I think there'll be some differences of opinion on putting all of it off. I'm
not saying we need to put all of it off. The only thing that we're looking at right now is 21. I think we should delay electrical by at least a year to see where this conversation stands a year from now.
And that's piling another $1 million into the next year's bonding then.
Yeah, but you saved $1 million this year.
I guess we'll discuss that at council. I don't know if this is the place to discuss that, because you're talking about a committee and this isn't the place to discuss the committee. So we understand, I guess what we've done is we understand there's a need for electricity, and maybe we'll decide to have it this year, and maybe we'll decide to have it next year, depending on what else happens in council. Is that pretty much sum it up, Alder Johnson?
Well, perhaps I think maybe a procedural question is in order here, and that is we're getting up updates from, but are we actually making modifications to this plan? And if so, when?
We are not making modifications right now. We were going to be waiting until we knew how much money we were going to be able to get and how we were allowed to spend that money from the state. So we were waiting to make the modifications probably until the 25th. Is that correct, Director Ellenbecker?
I would assume.
I would say that was how I was going to summarize again today. At this point, you've been hearing all the information. At any point, there are things that could be, again, we don't actually have an action item on here today, but we could flag items that either you're looking for more research, or the expectation is that we would make some changes on the 25th. Go through DPW infrastructure. We'll hopefully have more information. We will have more information on guidance from the ARPA grant. And at that point, we could end up revisiting any of these items and either move them out, change them, reduce them, ask more questions. So yeah, I didn't really expect to have changes today, but this way you're getting a lot of background information. And, I think something that Dan has pretty much said, or Director Ditchett has said, if you would have looked at our CIP from last year we had money in there every year to renovate all the floors, and there was some rather small dollars in there for electrical and mechanical. After he went through and got a full detailed quote or estimate, it went from a couple million to now what is almost $9 million, and that's why things have changed so drastically from one year over another, that the needs are much bigger for City Hall. And I think that helps facilitate the discussion that Alder Johnson is trying to make. There's also, we talked about it when the police were on the line too, is that they have repairs that they're looking for in the next 2 to 3 years also for their stations. So changes and some upgrades to police, now the number is getting bigger. And so, I think the need of the question whether or not you can add City Hall into your municipal building, including police, possibly fire admin, possibly muni court, all of a sudden you're reducing the number of buildings you have and just have one larger building, and potentially save some money over time on renovations and then get a new building.
Alder Dorf?
Yes, Alder Galvin.
I'm going to have to chime in too. Government is very guilty of this. The Brown County Courthouse was a perfect example. And in fact, the reason why the Brown County Board was meeting in City Hall was because they put off repairs on buildings for so long. They finally did it. The cost was astronomical. And the Green Bay Police Department, the building, it went from a 1-story building to a 2-story building. It originally had municipal court in it. We had to move it out. They had to get their own building. Now our footprint continues to grow. City Hall, obviously, it's a great looking building from the exterior, but it's old and it's showing. And the more we put off, I'm torn here, because the more we put off doing necessary repairs, the more we put ourselves in a position of having something catastrophic happen, which could affect our ability to do our jobs. But at the same time, now it's fire department, it's police department, it's City Hall, and a new parking ramp that we need to be thinking about in the future also. And if we start thinking down the road, or actually years ago, we should have been thinking, one large building with a parking ramp has the ability to cover a lot of these concerns, and at the same time open up a lot of valuable property for further development by combining it into one building that takes up a city block or two instead of what we have spread out right now downtown. It's part of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we need to be thinking like Alder Johnson is talking. And at the same time, though, I don't want to leave ourselves, looking back and going, darn it, we should have done those repairs, because now the electrical is shot and City Hall is going to be unfunctionable for quite a bit of time. And then what do? Start moving City Hall out of City Hall and move it elsewhere, rent space? And again, because we're a government body, we just don't have all sorts of money that we can just go out to the money tree and shake it extra hard to get what we need. We have to be responsible to the taxpayers. But I think at the same time, sometimes taking a look at these types of projects and seeing what we can do is being more responsible than just putting things off and putting them on the shelf until it becomes like our elevators. And we were down to one elevator at one time.
Right.
Now, how efficient is that? At the PD, we had a range that we couldn't use for years and years because it was out of date. And then we ended up spending $250,000 to install a new range that is not half the range of what our old one was. So you see this time and time again. We're renting space for evidence storage from private companies. I mean, so I think there's a lot in what Alder Johnson says. I also understand, though, Dan has got some serious concerns. If this roof continues to leak, what was the use of spending all that money on the 6th floor if that brand new flooring is starting to be stained already? Or if the electrical fails? I think we need to look at approving this, but at the same time, we really need to start, I don't know, at some of these needs that are more immediate, I think, than in the future.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't do these things. You know, I'm saying we got to buy ourselves a little bit of time, right? Dan mentioned, when City Hall was built, that's where I came up with the 70 years of this electrical service. I don't know that 71 years versus 72 years makes a big difference. And quite frankly, dropping it in 2021 is just as arbitrary if it would have landed in 2022, and then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So I think delaying a $1.1 million expense by 1 year just to buy yourselves a little bit of time to determine if there's even feasibility to that other conversation is, to me, that's a fiscally prudent direction. But I don't even know that we have to be having that conversation yet, because we don't even know what the overall bond request is going to come in at, right? If we're making numbers up, if we're allowed to bond $10 million and we have $30 million of requests in front of us, well, it might be a foregone conclusion already.
Right. So we should just wait. We should just wait. Yes. Oh, yes.
I have my hand up, but I don't think you can see me.
I know you, because you couldn't see you at all because you were a blank screen.
No. I've been live. It's just
different page.
You can't see everybody because we're sharing the screen. As soon as Alder Johnson proposed this idea of starting to talk about and think about the possibility of doing an entirely new building, I immediately wanted to say, and it's pretty much what Alder Galvin has said too. You don't wait until it's critical. It's always smart to start thinking in a new direction in advance. I completely support what Alder Johnson is saying. I think that it's smart to maybe put something off for 1 year, but start having the conversation now. Don't wait.
I'm not opposed to that, Alder Gerlach.
Well, I just want to put my voice in as saying I think it's a really smart thing, and I would encourage us to start thinking about it and considering it as a possibility sooner rather than later. That's all.
I 100% agree. We should have done it 5 years ago. I agree. So, okay. Yes, Alder Steuer. Alder Steuer.
Thank you, Chair. Some good conversation here. As far as the building, City Hall was built in 1955, so we're looking at about 66 years. So it's close to 70. I worked in that building for 25 years, and we had issues in the 80s, the 90s, heating, too hot, too cold. In wintertime, it's not the most efficient building in the world, to be honest. So I think our committee, Protection and Policy, will be more than willing to take a look at this. I think it needs to be at least visited upon. And if that means an ad hoc committee, I think we'll entertain the idea of at least speaking about it. And Alder Galvin brings up some good points too about all the different buildings that we have scattered around that we're utilizing. It'll be interesting to see what other communities have done with municipal buildings. Have they combined all of the municipal functions or not? So I think there's a lot we can talk about. And like I said, that's a big investment to put into a 66-year-old building that we're talking about. But I think we could look at a year off with some of the electrical, and if nothing else, at least get the conversation going. So I'm in favor of that at least. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on then from City Hall. And what is next?
If you have any other questions, that would be it for Director Ditchite, unless you have any other questions for him at this point.
Does anyone have any other questions
Great
for him?
job, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
So then there's two quick departments I'd like to tackle.
Okay.
Economic development. Right now they're currently showing a borrowing of $91,000, or it's not borrowing, it's the equipment purchase of $91,000. However, they're in the same situation. They have at the last minute got added into the lease program. So they will be getting 2 and 3 new vehicles in 2021. However, that $91,000 will be covered through the lease program, and we will not be borrowing for that. Same thing for 2022. We will be getting their whole fleet will be updated in the lease program. So it's on this report. We will not be bonding for them, but these are truly some capital purchases that we're making. Theirs just didn't get removed out of this document. Like Director Ditchite was saying, theirs was removed. Anything that's getting replaced by the lease program was removed from this document.
Okay.
So that would take care of that item. And then the other item I wanted to talk to is TIDS. TIF funding for 2 TIDS. And it's only got 1 TID here, so we'll start with this one. This is the shipyard, as we just discussed, in Alderdorf and Alder Johnson. Actually, we're in an RDA meeting earlier today, where we had discussed the original plan was the shipyard's about $10 million. That's what council had approved. We have previously borrowed $5.5 million for this area. 4.5 was really for the shipyard project. Another $1 million was borrowed to purchase some property, which is in the area, but not in the south side of the slip for the shipyard. Either way, we borrowed 5.5, 4.5 for the shipyard project, another 6.5 here, which is about 11 million. So originally, I mean, we easily could change the number to 10 in the year 2023 down to 1.5 million, and anything above that we'd have to get additional approval for. But again, this is just placeholders. 2 weeks, and we were looking to see whether or not the merge agreement was going to be moving forward. Since we are looking that the merge agreement will be moving forward, I believe I will be getting a more up-to-date projection on the phases and the costs of how much expenses we think we will need in the next year. That $2 million could go down a little considering we have a fund balance available. But again, now that we are moving forward with merge, we will reevaluate this number for what we need for 2021 for the shipyard. Any questions on the shipyard funding? The only other item is
Diana?
Yes.
I would reiterate maybe part of the conversation we had earlier today in RDA, which is recognizing that if we are going to meet those contractual obligations as part of that development agreement, there's likely going to need to be additional funding. Now, whether it's part of the shipyard allocation or other capital improvement line items, I think we need to figure that out to ensure that we can meet the obligations of that contract.
Would be either going back to council and saying that this project is going to cost us more, get more approval from the council for the TIP borrowing. Maybe there is, whether or not there is infrastructure or another grant or something that could help pay for additional the cost for that area.
Well, and I'm even thinking more specifically, I think about the street connections. I don't think that needs, nor should it be part of the shipyard authorization. I think that should just be a line item under Public Works. I mean, we're building roads. That's what Public Works does. So for what it's worth, I think that's where it should be contemplated.
Okay. And the other item, it's not on here, but I wanted to follow up to what Director Ditchite had said. Yes, in TIF 5, we have a positive balance in TIF. The TIF is bringing in more increment than we have as annual costs. And that TIF expenditure period ends this year, which means we can still create projects now and pay for them over the next couple of years, but we can't come up with any new projects starting next year. But then we have 5 years to bring additional increment in. So as Director Ditchite said earlier, we have a positive fund balance in TIF 5. It's an older TID. We'll be closing down in 6 years at the longest. It must terminate within 6 years. In that TIF, we are working on a list of projects to set up and use up that available fund balance. And one of the large items, as Director Ditchite said, is improving the dock wall for the cruise ship. We're looking at improvements to Lake Park And there are some other infrastructure that is being looked at in what we would is TIF 5. And so those projects are all being right now evaluated by the development team. And of course, if any of these would go to a contract, then you would see them through committees.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, just one.
Okay, Alder Johnson.
One of the things that the Economic Development Authority had been taking up was strategic land acquisition to expand the I-43 industrial park. We had conducted a wetland study to determine where buildable lots could be acquired, and then we had subsequently followed that up with a survey of property owners. Would you be willing to sell in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or never? Something along those lines. But the idea was to try to figure out, try to plan out when land acquisitions could occur to expand the industrial park. I would assume that would be supported through TIF. But is that being considered as part of the capital improvement plan?
That is new information to me. I have not heard anything about these potential acquisitions, and I may have missed them by not reading the minutes from those meetings. But that is something I certainly could bring up in a development team meeting tomorrow and ask what the assumptions are. And at this point, you're right. I haven't heard about it, so I wasn't able to add it, we haven't added it to the capital improvement plan at this point.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it was anything that's imminent, but I'd like to think it's something we were going to do within 5 years, in which case then it should have a place in here.
Right.
But maybe staff's got more information on that. I'm sure they do, and could give you some direction.
Were we doing that through plan or RDA? I remember we talked about it, Alder Johnson.
EDA was discussing that.
Was it EDA? Yeah. Okay. Because I remember the discussion. So yeah, economic development should probably have info on that. Good point. Okay, is that it?
Mm-hmm. That would take care of what we expected to get through tonight for the capital improvement plan. That leaves everything left is really Director Grenier's. And again, one more time, DPW, infrastructure, parking, utilities, sanitary, and storm. And that we would tackle them next meeting, May 25th. At that point, we would have more guidance. And then we can talk about funding. And at that point, we can decide whether or not we want to make a decision on making changes. If that is the amount we want to borrow, or we could push it off to one more meeting saying, this is what we came up with. We drafted, let everybody go away for 2 weeks. And then we can make a decision on the following meeting. We can decide whether or not we want to, I will put an action item on there for the next meeting. But again, that doesn't mean it has to be done, that you have the chance then to take action or push it off one more week for one more meeting for discussion.
So what is our schedule in June? Do we have I know that we aren't going to be ready. I would guess for the council meeting on the 1st. So probably it's the 29th that I think because we have a 1st and a 29th council meetings in June. So are we going to maybe meet on the 15th? And if we need another meeting, meet on the 22nd?
My schedule shows we're set for June 22nd right now for Finance Committee.
Right. And we might be able to get through it. What do you think?
I'm selfish and don't want to have a meeting on my birthday, June 15th.
Okay, I'm good with that. Cross out the 15th. Okay, so we'll have it on the 22nd. And then, we've got to borrow money, right? We got to get going on this stuff.
Yes.
So we have no meetings in July, none. So we have to, City Council doesn't have a meeting. We must decide. And remember, we did, and we don't need to do this again, but we would have those joint meetings for the budget. We did have a joint meeting for bonding. I guess it's just not going to fit in this year. I think we're just going to have to decide on the 29th and maybe I'm glad to see there are some alders at the finance meeting. Maybe we can get some more alders to come on the 22nd. So they'll have at least some background before they vote on the 29th.
We certainly can I could try to give you as much information on the meeting in 2 weeks from now. And if you're ready to take it to council for June 1st, we would be able to move forward at that point.
And I guess that would give us the opportunity, if we weren't ready for part of it, we could move forward, but then we could come back. We have that other meeting in June if we needed to.
Correct.
Committee, what do you think our goal should be? To try to get through not only DPW and those things, but also what we might need to recommend to cut at that time, if we need to cut anything. Also, that meeting to hear the complete discussion on how we are allowed to use the money. That we maybe are just going to have to decide. That's going to be a really long meeting. Get some coffee, because I think it's going to be, there's a lot. And then we may decide we just can't get that all done. I don't know. Should we just see
I
how
think we play it by ear, and if we have to schedule a meeting in July, then we have to schedule a meeting in July.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more about the 1st, getting it done by the 1st of June or the 29th of June. I
think June 29th is reasonable, as long as that meets finances, time frame for being able to get the bond issuance out.
Because I was hearing Diana saying, let's try to get it to council by the 1st of June. Wasn't I hearing you say that?
Yeah, and one thing that we will talk about guidance at the next meeting, what they're going to allow. But I also have heard from several alders, and we really want to pull together. Overall, once we have that money, the council wants to have some decisions on how we're going to spend that money. So if right now we say, oh well, we could use it for some, let's say, buildings or facilities improvements, we're now allocating those dollars, and yet we also had some expectations that we were going to slow down, look at all the dollars, see how did we want to allocate the money that we're receiving in, and what kind of projects we want to move them forward. So I think we said certainly. I really think it's a lot to try to expect to get it all done at the next meeting.
Is there any reason, Diana, that we couldn't separate the bonding discussion from the federal funds? Well, I mean, I almost think we ought to do that. Let's focus on. And again, I'm making numbers up, but let's say we can bond 10 million. If we didn't have these federal funds coming in, what is the 10 million that is of highest priority to us? And let's make that commitment. And then I think
we can add on. Yeah.
We can always expand later.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
That would be a good way to go. I think then council, because council wants to make that decision on that money. Mm-hmm.
We've got 4 years, right? I think to spend that.
Right,
so we don't have to be in a rush.
Okay.
Spend it all now.
What?
I said, spend it all now.
Spend it all now. Everything is on sale. Okay. We'll just get as much done as we can on the 25th. We'll just prepare ourselves to work hard and then go off for Memorial Day. All right.
Sounds good.
What else do we got here? Contingency accounts at 150,000. It's like the loaves and the fishes. It's just there and keeps being there. And then the next finance meeting will be on Tuesday, May 25th at 4:30 p.m. Anything else, group? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion adjourned by Alder Corpus Dax, second by Alder Galvin. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Have a good
Thank you
week.
for your hard work.